Thank you very much for being invited. It's very great to be here. I'm very grateful to UNICEF. And is Francesca here? Yes. And is Eric here, Swanson? Yes. I mean, with you from World Bank Development Data Group and from UN Statistic Division and UNICEF and Population Division that I know is over here, all you made my professional life. Thank you very much for the data. Thank you very, very much. And it's a privilege to be here. And I will try to contemplate a little about this. I changed the title. I had a success or a doubtful success on the net with this interview with a Danish journalist. Thank you. Young man helps old man. It's a very... and the best thing I said in that interview was when he came with this all thing, you know, yes, but you use statistics and you know how much you can cheat with statistics. And I just answered, I don't talk about data, I talk about girls. Because I think we shouldn't, outside there, we shouldn't talk about data. Because what we talk about is reality. We are studying reality and we are communicating how reality is. Whether it is the proportion of girls who go to school, whether it is the proportion of children who die, whether violence against women increase or decrease in Serbia, as we heard. We are not talking about the numbers, except some few of us who have personality disorders, you know, and ended up here. But most of us, we are interested in how people live. And that's what we communicate. So that's why I said understanding children through data. And I just got this idea that the conceptual model that we have been used have been quite simple. You know, we're interested in data and we have the world, so we collect data from the world and then we send it back. It's quite an easy conceptual model, you know. I don't think it works. Because we handle the world as if it was colleagues. Data analyst colleagues out there in the world. And if there is anything out of their world in the world, there are very few data analyst colleagues out there. They are very rare. You go to any dinner party and you'll see it. So let me start with you. Another thing, we have to use data when we discuss data. We have to use numbers when we discuss what we do with numbers. So let me take this question. How many children out of 10 in the world get measles vaccines? And just to make it straightforward, measles vaccine is the most important of the vaccines we have. It's delicate, so it's if it's outside the refrigerator for 10 to 20 minutes, it's destroyed. So imagine now, 10 representative kids between the first and the second birthday. How many of them? Can I start in this end? How many think that it's 1 out of 10? Hand up. How many think it's 2 out of 10? 3 out of 10? 4 out of 10? 5 out of 10? 6 out of 10? 7 out of 10? 8 out of 10? 9 out of 10? Everyone is not, I won't ask you. Same thing with girls who are how many girls out of 10 go to primary school? I mean girls in that age group, and it's more or less 1 to 6 years in school, the first 6 years in school. Out of 10 girls in that age group in the world, how many think that it's just 1? How many think 2? How many think 3? How many think 4 girls out of 10? How many think 5 girls out of 10? How many think 6? How many think 7? How many think 8? How many think it's 9? And it's not all, yes. It's 8 out of 10 who get measles, 83%. And it's 9 out of 10. The result I got from you, though I wasn't cruel to collect it exactly, was one of the best results I've ever got. On average, you are just about, as a group, about 20 years behind your time. Yeah, that's what you are. The average which response, you didn't see, you were facing me all the time, so you didn't see that. And it's interesting. Because we got this idea in Gapminder Foundation. I don't work at the university any longer. We're a small group, Gapminder Foundation, which I work together with World Bank and UN Statistics Division. And our director, which is my son, which has led all this development, for which I've taken all the credit. It's called patriarchal. It works very fine. He said, let's not have number of clicks or number of views at our outcome measure. Let's not have fame. Let's look at impact. Let's study. So we use the best web-based survey company we have in Sweden, and we asked the Swedes if they knew the MDG1. And this was the result. We asked in Norway, we asked in Britain, and we asked in America. And this is the correct answer. This is MDG1 in these 3 countries, and they all score worse than the chimp. Because the chimp would have in a group of chimpanzees, 33% would get the right answer. It's quite tragic, isn't it? When it comes to some sort of idea in the general public about MDGs, it's almost a complete failure. And it's very difficult to use data, isn't it? Because if we use data on how we succeeded with MDG, that we worked so much with, didn't we, in all different levels, and just to accept that we failed is very painful. So we do like all the others, we don't use the data. Because it's too painful. And we don't communicate, and we don't want people to measure our impacts. So they didn't get it. And these are not like, this is not a quiz. What we ask them is, the proportion of people with extreme poverty in the world, did it increase, did it remain the same, or did it decrease? And not just increase a little, did it double, same, or half? And they didn't know it. We didn't get this understanding through. And I've been in profession. Yes, if I go to Economist, World Economic Forum, I think I got 51% right answer on this one. And if I'm professionals, they know this one. Then I take this question with measles, you know. This is Sweden and Norway, major funder for measles vaccination in the world. And this is US. And this is the right answer. And there is no group in the world, except you today, that has beaten the chimp on this question. That means that the general development of the world, we have not got it right. I have also tested this in some groups in sub-Saharan Africa, some in India, some in Latin America. They are slightly better than West Europe and North America, but not so much. That means that the big data we collect, probably data is better understood at local level where it's weaker, as we've talked today. Because in your own district, your own country, you know a little more how unemployment rates are. But the world data that we communicate, that's sort of really challenging because you don't have your personal experience from the whole world. So this is a shocking thing, you know. So this with giving the data back to the world, it seems it doesn't work really well. So why do we do this with data? I've now sat behind here and I heard the very, very good discussions in these last 2 panels, and much of this was covered there. But my way of putting it is like this. Yes, we do data because we want to advocate. We want to argue for our thing, whether it is on international level to vaccinate the children, or whether it's in the local level with the raw minority in Serbia, or whether it's vaccination of children in northern Kenya or whatever. You know, we use it for advocate. That's fine, but that's not the most important. That's not why we collect data. We want to monitor what we do. We want to see whether violence against women decrease. We want to see whether children get vaccinated in the remote areas. We want to see if things change, monitor. But the main reason, we want to understand. We must understand what is it that has to be done. What needs to be done and how and where. So the analysis and the formation of policy, I think that's the most important. Then comes monitoring and in the end advocacy. There's a risk in companies, organizations, and in ministries that advocacy becomes the #1 reason for collecting data. And that's a quite costly way of doing it. So how should this change the concept? Because if this is the main thing, and then it doesn't work. If we have communicated and we have done such an effort, and I'm the one most to be blamed, isn't it, that MDG wasn't understood? Because I was in the front line. You were supporting me with all good data, and people like me was in the front line. We got attention, we did all these nice videos, and yet the result was so meager. It was really shocking. I would never have measured this myself if I didn't have that cruel director who was my son, who forced me to do this. And perhaps it was because he worked for 3.5 years. He was product manager for public data at Google. And as you heard from the corporate sector, they measure. They measure impact, because if they don't measure impact, they go bankrupt, isn't it? They have to understand who is buying what from them and where is the niche, where they can fulfill, how does their market segment look like? Because that's a direct feedback. And that's, to me, being a public health professor from Sweden, loving tax, it's very embarrassing for me to accept that the corporate sector is so much better at doing this. So my conceptual model is like this. Yes, the world is here and we get the data, but the data has to go here and we have to change concept. We have to simplify it enormously, and then the concept goes down to the world. If the problem is in Serbia that there's so much violence against women that is not registered, that is the concept, We have now, since we started to collect this data, it's increasing, but we know now that there's so much out there. Report it. Women stand up, have organization, do something about it. It's a concept we have to have. And if we have the concept is that poverty is really going down, we have to say it's going down. We can't come with numbers. That doesn't work. Numbers doesn't enter into the public mind. And let me say one thing here which hasn't worked. You have seen this before. What is the concept? How did we try to explain population and demography? We said that the old balance was like this. In the past, when population didn't grow, parents on average had 6 children. So why was there no population growth? Why it was very slow? It took thousands of years to increase the population. It was because 1, 2, 3, 4 tragically died before they grow up to have children themselves. And this is the situation in the rainforest today, with those small ethnic groups living there. And then yet you hear activists saying in the rainforest, people live in ecological balance with nature. Obviously they are not. They are dying in ecological balance with nature. Can you see how you can't solve this with numbers? You have to have it really blunt. You have to be very blunt and clear. But people have an amazing understanding about nature, admirable understanding, and their human rights should be defended. But you shouldn't do it with illusions, And why did population start growing? Yes, it was not that people got more children with the Industrial Revolution, it was that more survived. And the reason that the Swedes filled up Minnesota was that they got a better life in Sweden. So they became more and there were no land any longer, so they left. And today we are reaching a new balance, And we know UN Population Division is telling us it's sort of leveling off now. By the end of this century. And we have reached what we call the new balance. So we try to have these two concepts instead, old balance and new balance. And old balance, population is controlled by death and graveyard. And the new balance is controlled by love and bedroom. Bedroom. Yeah, pillow talk. You heard me, but you didn't understand that it was this I said. Of course, and I found out, how do I explain it? This expression in America, pillow talk, It's so nice. Darling, let's make a baby tonight. And then 1 year later, darling, let's have sex tonight, but we wait with another baby. We wait with another baby until we can take care of that one. To have these concepts. If we just give numbers, it doesn't change the basic concept. Read Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. We try to use numbers against thinking fast and we fail. We fail. We must have concepts that change. And not for analysis, not for monitoring. There we have the numbers. But when we communicate and when we do advocacy, we have to have it in a much simpler way. This very few know. You read from UN Population Division, and I studied the last prospects now. The number of children in the world have stopped increasing. As of now, it's only the adults that will increase. And this is unknown. This is less than 10% of highly educated people in North America and West Europe, and almost the rest of the world who doesn't know this. 10% know it, 90% doesn't know it. I claim this is the biggest numerical event in the history of mankind that was ever completely missed by media. because no one had the interest of communicating it, it seems. And it's so important to understand this, you know. Look here. A way of trying numbers. We've used these bubble graphs. That has been partly successful. If I put number of babies per woman on this axis, and I put the tragic child mortality there, 100 per 1,000, 200 per 1,000, 300 per 1,000. And each bubble is a country. You see some countries were down here, 1965, the developed, industrialized, or Western, whatever you call them. And the rest was here, developing, or South, or Third World, or whatever you call them. Everyone keeps changing terms, but still use two groups. And when I say you can't use two groups any longer, there are more groups, what should we call them? It's so engraved. The concept that it is so two parts of the world is so much in their head, so we can't get the idea that there are three groups today. Because look, when I run this, what happens? I run this. Now I go to the animation here. Here you have the same thing. You go here, and here we go. You can see, no? You see there, Mao Zedong drives China with family planning, goes over here. Here comes Brazil and Mexico. They don't care about the Vatican. They put on the condom. They move down this way. Here comes India, Bangladesh, catch up there. In 2000, look at Ethiopia, look at Ethiopia, look at Ethiopia, what they're doing there. Absolutely fantastic. And there's not two groups of countries any longer. There's not two groups of countries any longer. There's some who lags behind here. There is Afghanistan, you know, there is Congo. Of course, and we know why. They're lagging behind, you know. Others are more successful. Look here, Sudan, Kenya. Kenya here, like in the front of Africa now. Africa has such a big variation, the blue African bubbles. So what we need here is not to continue to use developing countries. And yes, the SDG document is full of developing country concept, all the way through, and no definition whatsoever. I honor UN Statistic Division who have on their webpage, there is no definition for what is developing countries. So we don't use data for the concepts. And then we try to have data below that. It's quite a sort of strength. So this is how it looks now. Look here. There's almost no one in that box left. They're all gone, except those who are war-torn and have special problems up there. Now, the problem here, which we have to understand, is the demographic situation. Because the child mortality has gone down, but not fertility rate. There's a group of countries now which have extremely fast population growth, and they cannot stay in that area very long, because then they will double. I have made a documentary with BBC that will air on the 23rd of September of the SDGs. And I only talk about goal 1.1. And my problem to understand that is that it's easier to end extreme poverty fast than to do it slowly. It's counterintuitive. But if you do it fast, you get everyone out and they get two-child families. And the population doesn't grow. You take half of them out of extreme poverty. Oh, that's good. We took half of them out of extreme poverty in 20 years. But the other ones will double. You will have the same number left. There is no way. We have to have a deep conceptual understanding. This is not about advocacy. The problem is that people setting policies in UN organizations, in governments, not to mention aid organizations, they don't have a clue about many of these mechanisms. And look at the countries also, how difficult it is. If I split Ethiopia, these are the different parts of Ethiopia. Addis Ababa has 1.6 children per woman, less than Stockholm and New York. And Somali region with the tragic civil war is up in the other end. Trends are very important. I took this up as being the most worrying trend I know now in the data. And it's about children out of primary school. It has gone so well, schooling, but it has stalled. Can you see that it has stalled? Since about 2007, the number of children out of primary school does not fall any longer. This is extremely worrying. So it's because girls cannot go to school? No, it's not, because 45% of them are boys. It's not gender issue any longer. It's extreme poverty, remote rural area, mainly in fragile nations or fragile regions. And that's why we have least data. Where we have least data is where the needs of children are biggest. This is the challenge. And the national average is fine. Kenya is doing fine at present, on average. And in the front, it's miraculous. I flew and sat next to the head of recruitment for R&D for Ericsson. You know Ericsson. You may not know Sweden, but you know Ericsson. And they had just recruited new software development for the new base stations, and the 3 best they got was in Nairobi. The 3 most capable person they managed to recruit this year was in Nairobi. Such young talent exists now in the front of Africa, at the same time as remote rural areas still are having such challenge. That we need to understand, you know. And this is extreme poverty. This is extreme poverty. It's not having food for the day. And to conceptually understand what that is, and not just talk about inequality. You know, inequality is nice for a concept. Even UNICEF talk about inequality because it's also an issue in the richest countries today. Whereas I'm not so concerned about inequality in the poorest countries, I'm concerned about the levels for the poorest. I'm concerned that the poorest people have to get food for the day, vaccination, contraceptive, schools, and a road. Whether the other richest get much richer or just a little richer doesn't matter so much, it's their level. And the country, you know the country in Europe that decreased inequality most the last 2 years, which one it was? That used to be very unequal and now it's much more equal? It's Greece, yes, it's Greece, of course. The best way to have inequality is to have an economic catastrophe, because that... You see, we have to understand concepts. We have to see, we cannot just have data directly on this. So where are the problems? Where are the problems? What sort of data do we need? This is a typical district in a remote part of a low-income country. I spent 3 months with the Ministry of Health in Liberia working on the Ebola data, which was a very interesting experience, especially to work with such good nationals. Also many from other organizations, especially the 5 leading Liberians were extremely capable. And we saw remote districts where the problem was. This is a district, and there's a river passing through it, and there's a road. And where the road hits the river is the district capital. If you make quintile data, all the better off in the district live somewhere in the center. Where do we have extreme poverty, where they are not vaccinated, where children still don't go to school, is there, and there. And this is not catched by the surveys, as we have them today. It's not catched by the surveys. So we need more local data. So I think I'll jump that one because I'm already over. How to get data. There was one comment which was a little hastily in the panel here. That was that we had many, many different data. And I think it was said we shouldn't put it into different compartments. On the contrary, that's exactly what we should do. We should understand the wide difference between different types of data, what it measures, how it is measured, the uncertainty of it. And we heard this brilliant example of it when it comes to violence against women. It's almost impossible to get good data on that. Because the only thing when you get awareness of it is that it will keep increasing. It will keep increasing. Very difficult to get good data. We still have Julian Assange who doesn't want to come back to Sweden to clarify whether he raped or not. You see how difficult it is to get data on rapes. That's a man who leaks data, but he doesn't. But this data, I don't have. We have a feminist foreign policy, and we stand by it in Sweden. We vote for it. And we want him back in court to clarify it. We think he's a coward, coming and arguing about completely different things. If you want afterwards, I can give you details about that weekend, what he did in Stockholm. It wasn't severe, but it was breaking the law of Sweden. As we understand, but he's welcome to defend himself in court. And I use my prestige to say this, because the young women who say it are not listened to internationally. So, we get data through census. We have done that for 2,500 years, since the Chinese emperor started. We count the people. We see where they live and what ages they have. We get service data. Service data, which is health service, school, and so on. And we have it often for the providers, but now more and more we can get it from the user also. That's why we have the help of the digital. We get civil registration data, where you get every birth, every death is registered. And very many people are enthusiastic about that. But be careful because that's quite advanced to make that function. When it comes to child mortality, we will only have all deaths registered when the death rate have come down. There's no way we will get that function in extremely poor societies. You cannot get deaths in children registered before you have health service. Don't even think about getting deaths registered where you don't even provide vaccines. But it's like some professionals know one method and then they want that method to be in the whole world. We don't have contextualized. We don't use data to analyze where certain methods for collection work or doesn't work. Household survey, well, that's classical, you know. Many sample methods. How do you sample your household? Is it a refugee camp? You ask everyone. Otherwise, you have to sample them. And the way to do that in two-stage with a two-stage cluster sample method is really what I've given us essential social data and economic data throughout the world. You know? And mixed studies, DHS, Living Standard Measurement Service are an example of that. We need this even in the richest countries. Things that we don't get in another way, we need to do household survey. But in the poorest countries, we need them because we don't get the data in another way, since children are not registered. So be very careful about household surveys. And I think it was wisely said here, don't demand too many surveys. Don't demand them too often, because it's better to do them with bigger interval and maintain the quality on them. Sentinel sites, that's what China and India is doing. They have some parts of their countries where they register every birth and death continuously. We have something called demographic surveillance sites for research where we follow them over time. That's why we know cause of death at different levels. And we can do remote sensing. We can look from the air and in space, or we can fly, Cape Town, fly the slums of Cape Town, and then they count the roofs, and they know how many households they have. And they divide them to the water supply. You can do a lot of things. And this is just increasing what we can do. Digital exhaust, I learned today, cell phone data, all this data which now is available, even in remote parts of Africa. And we still hasn't used it. You know the clever way people do it in remote villages where they can't afford the telephone call? They have a Morse system where they phone 3 times to their brother who is in the capital. That means phone back immediately, we need money. Or they phoned 3 times and then later 1 more time, and that means we are coming to visit you within 1 day. It's a very intelligent way. And you can look at that, and they cheat the big telecompanies. That's why I admire them. After long research, I've come to the conclusion that people in extreme poverty are very clever. Otherwise, they wouldn't be alive. They're very clever, and they know to their advantage to do things. And then we have modeling. We can use these data, and we can estimate things. How can we get extreme poverty away? How can we find out those areas where we most of all need actions for the children? There is a tendency today, I see, in the development aid especially, to focus in the big middle in the world. Sorry, I have overdrawn some extra minute here, but I will show you in the end how I see the world. I am at UNICEF, and I will only talk about money here in the end. This is the income distribution of the world, from $1 a day to $10 a day to $100 a day, from 1800. Red is Asia, blue, Africa, little green here, America, almost no people 200 years ago, and this was Europe. 85% lived in extreme poverty in the world 200 years ago. No difference between Africa or Europe. No measurable as we see historically. And this is what has happened. Here we go. Can you see? Year by year there passed, almost nothing happens. It was very slow. Industrial revolution did not reach the general population until the end of the 19th century. We have to go to now 1840, 1850. Now, can you see now? Now Europe is coming. Europe is coming. America get more people here, and they are moving out. And by 1880, you have almost half the population out of extreme poverty here. Asia remains there. Africa remains in extreme poverty. And now, in the 19th century, population starts growing over here. But they don't get richer. But there they get richer and richer. And the world changed shape. And now we get the dichotomy. Now the world divides into 2 groups. Developed and developed. And then China starts, and all the other successful economies, and Africa follows. And it closes like this. And if we continue to 2030, it will look like this. It's over. The dichotomy is over. And we have to have different policies at different levels. The sad thing is that the number of people in extreme poverty in the world today is the same as it was 200 years ago. The number is the same. It's just now that we can start to decrease the number. The percentage has fallen, but the number is the same. And we must know where they are. And to me, improved situation for children and women is the core of getting away extreme poverty. And that's why we have to use the data to analyze very carefully, and we have to use the data to change our concepts. Thank you very much.
Well, he may not like the term, but he is a rock star. Rock star of data. Thank you so much, Professor Rosling.